Hi there, this is Billy Earl, and we are here on Eastern Shore Politics. We are thrilled today to have the adult voice in the conversation about our government, about the place where we live, where we work, where we do our thing. This is President John Cannon, who is with us today, and we're going to talk about things that affect everyone. John, thank you so much for coming in.
Sure, thanks for having me.
Appreciate it.
Yes, thank you.
Question A is a divisive issue right now, and part of the problem, I think, is a lack of precise and correct and truthful information.
Right.
One of the things that seemingly comes up is the cost of having a county executive and whether it's worth it, whether it's cost efficient. How do you feel about this?
Right. Well, that's a very good point that you make. The concerns is cost efficient, cost of the operation as a whole.
Yeah.
Efficiency of the operations, whether it's legislative or whether it's management. What are those concerns, and is it really worth the investment?
Mm-hmm.
So it's been about an 18-year experiment. And we've invested about $10 million in that. And I think the public really needs to ask itself, what have we accomplished
Right.
in that 18-year cycle that is so much more beneficial than what it might have been the prior 20, 30, or 50 years in which we had a councilmanic form of government.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think we've really seen a lot of benefit out of that type of an investment. Right now we're at about $800,000 a year. It doesn't really include a lot of the legal expenses either.
Right.
So if you think about it, within the next 2 years, it could easily work its way up to $1 million, and you have to wonder, what is Wicomico County really getting? How efficient is this government for that type of an investment?
Right. $1 million a year right now is what's getting...
No, it's about 800 right now.
800,000.
Yeah, 800, yeah.
Well, that's
It's getting close.
that's fairly serious money.
Yeah, it is.
Okay. Dovetailing that issue appears to be a question of cost efficiency. How does the voter evaluate that issue? What elements go into that analysis?
Well, I think you have to evaluate what has occurred over the last several years in order to be able to define whether an executive legislative form of government is the most efficient form of government. From my perspective in these years, because I've been there probably about 14 to the 18, there's been some inconsistencies. I know that more recently we had a collective bargaining agreement that we got into, and there were massive delays in this.
It's dangerous, isn't it?
It came very close to being very dangerous. The initial negotiations were delayed by about 4 months. They didn't really get started in January instead of starting back in September. So the final first draft of the collective bargaining agreement for the deputies of Wicomico County was to come before the council. I believe the deadline was maybe in March. We were still asking for it and didn't get it until April. So it was a month late just by what was required by law.
Okay.
So the problem with that is once the collective bargaining agreement came to the council, we were very restricted by exactly how much time we had to evaluate it. And it was very serious because we were looking to give extensive raises to the deputies, which we wanted to do. We also wanted to implement a COLA program for the retirement. The hiccup to this whole thing came when we weren't given a true actuarial of what it would cost the county in order to fund long-term this COLA for the retirees.
Really?
Yeah, because you have to evaluate that. That can be a lot of money.
Yeah.
So that we didn't really get a true actuary. Now the problem here is that by the time we received it, and it was so late, we were up against the wall, whereas if we didn't conclude our discussions within maybe a 3-4 week period, it's going to go to arbitration. That's
Right.
the process. What does arbitration mean? Only one thing, really. It goes into the legal realm.
Yeah.
So you're subjected to tens, if not hundreds of thousands of dollars in legal fees to start the process all over again.
That's correct.
It wasn't the council's fault. It was an opportunity for the council to be accused of delaying the process when we were only trying to do our due diligence to make sure that it was financially sustainable.
Okay.
We were also characterized as being anti-law enforcement when we were quite willing to give these concessions. The deputies, they're friends of ours, and we respect law enforcement immensely. Every member of the council does. But that was an opportunity to portray us as anti-law enforcement, which was unfortunate. So no need for those type of, trying to take those type of political swipes at people because we're just trying to do our job. But that was one issue that we faced. Another issue that we faced, of course, was the safari at the quarry, when you're trying to wonder how efficient the operations are. And also transparency comes into this a lot. With the safari at the quarry, the executive chose to team up with a promoter and created a 364-day contract. Now, I don't think anybody wants to pay this kind of money for this type of office for someone to initially, the first thing that's attempted is to try to circumvent the process.
Right.
So you have a situation where it's a 364-day contract, and even Joe asked at a council meeting with the promoter and said, how many 364-day contracts have you signed in your life? The guy goes, I never have. This is the first. And the executive admitted that she made it 364 days because if it had been a year, it would have had to come before the council. Well, what's wrong with that? That should be the process. So the
unless you have something to hide.
Unless there's certain concerns that things that we don't know about. But so here it was where the council was circumvented entirely. And what's the real problem with that? The public was completely left out.
Right.
No public hearings, no signage, nothing at all. And that's what caused the majority of the controversy, because you had a local neighborhood association that was very concerned about this being in the right next door.
Yeah.
And it turned into a real battle. I think the battle actually became very heated because once they pushed back, then they were berated, either on Facebook or personally. You found that they were being subjected to quite a bit of pressures through social media, insults and barbs and whatever you might have, attempting to have people arrested, things like that, from the executive branch, which I think is uncalled for because we're supposed to be protecting the citizens of Wicomico County, not attacking them. So that was a second issue where we're concerned about the efficiency of the operations from the legislative branch. Further back in history, we had one incident where I received a call. This is funny. I received a call from the mayor of Delmar.
Okay.
She goes, John, what's going on with the property tax sale? I said, I don't know what you're talking about. Every year we have a property tax sale with those people who are delinquent. The properties go up for auction, and those revenues, whatever revenues we receive, go to the individual municipalities or they go to the county. So this was the mayor of Delmar. She goes, what happened to tax? I have no idea. She goes, well, they've been canceled. I said, I don't know if that's really true. I have to find out. Well, it turns out she was right. The executive had unilaterally decided to cancel the tax sales for the entire year. It had never been done before. The argument on that was the fact that the executive thought that, well, we'll give them another year to get their finances together. Maybe then they can pay them so that it doesn't have to go to a tax sale. Not a truly, I guess, valid argument. The reality behind it was that at the time there was close to $6,000 in property taxes that were owed by the executive. And they didn't want to see their name in the paper. That was an embarrassment. So it wasn't, so the solution was that the tax sales were canceled.
That's outrageous.
It's a reality. It was truly part of what happened. Another issue that we had was we couldn't go to the bond market one year at all. They said that, well, it just isn't the time to do it, but it was the only year we never went to the bond market. Wicomico County, as far as capital expenses, came to a complete standstill.
Mm-hmm.
They couldn't go to the bond market because the individual that was appointed as our finance director was not confirmed by the county council.
Right.
So legally, that person is not validly your director of finance. Well, it went well in Wicomico County, and it continued. And this individual continued to get paid. The process continued regardless. But you couldn't pull that off in New York.
No.
You couldn't go to the bond market in New York, sign a $20 or $50 million bond, and have someone signing that document. And they knew that. It would be fraud.
Fraud.
Right. So what happened? We came to a complete standstill as far as our capital expenses are concerned.
Why do things like that happen? That's got to be the question that the voters who are evaluating question A must be asking themselves. Why is this happening?
Well, it's happening because, in true honesty, and this is legitimately above board. It's happening because I believe the way that we're structured with the executive legislative form of government is that too much authority has been vested in the executive branch,
right?
And that's subject to abuse. we saw where more recently, the recycling stations were completely removed. 3 of them, I believe 2, if not 3, were completely removed. They disappeared overnight.
I know.
There was no notice ahead of time. 2 of them were ones I used.
Yeah.
So I recognized it right away. So,
As did I.
Unfortunately, I don't recycle anymore. And we did it every day.
Yeah.
But it just became so inconvenient. But, they just disappeared. And that was simply by the swipe of a pen or from the executive. They just said, we're not going to do this. There were like 3 different reasons within 3 different weeks as to why it was done. But to this day, we're really not sure exactly why that happened. But that's an issue, that's a concern.
Right.
And then more recently, which was a very popular issue, was the encryption of the radios.
Oh, yeah.
Where the executive literally refused to allow Mike Lewis to have his radios encrypted at all.
Yeah.
And then finally, once Michael came down with a lot of pressure, the executive reversed course, allowed the encryption of the radios, but had one caveat. And that was that there were radios would be in her office, and 1 radio would be given to Eastern Shore Undercover.
Right.
Now, you don't want to leave the safety of the deputies up to the discretion of someone who is on Facebook and is a blogger on Facebook and who actually profits from these early releases of whatever information they can get by listening to encrypted radios.
Right.
The problem with that is that the deputies could show up on a scene and there are citizens there in a crime scene and they're already there because they've read about it.
Yeah.
So that was a problem. Later on, it came out that there was a $3,500 contribution that he had made to her campaign. She said it wasn't. It was to some business seminar, but it was a business seminar sponsored by her campaign, and the benefits went to her campaign. So we felt there was quite a conflict there. And,
yeah.
Yeah, and not until Mike Lewis came to the council meeting, because I said, Michael, if the public needs to know, the public needs to know. So that's what we did. We brought it out to a forum with the public so that they could see exactly what was happening. And I think the public caught on quite quickly. These were serious lacks of transparency. There's supposed to be greater transparency, greater checks and balances, but they didn't exist at all in this process.
Okay, that opens up a line of questioning that is fascinating, and that is what is the data or the datum that the public doesn't know? What treasure trove of these kinds of issues? Because as a normal citizen, we don't know what we don't know.
Right.
And so as a voter, when you're going in for question A, it appears to me that there's a direct link between transparency and the knowledge of these events and the way a person would vote on it, but there seems to be massive confusion as to the way that this is transpiring. And it seems to be circling around this issue of the council's trying to make a power grab, and if this happens, then there's not going to be any more checks and balances.
Sure.
Which doesn't appear to be available now.
Well, yeah, you're 100% correct. The irony of this whole situation is that there are no checks and balances with this former system. When you have a 7-member council, you inherently have checks and balances because each and every one of you have to collaborate.
Everybody's got a voice.
And you're also doing the public. So where is your checks and balances with the other council members and with the public as a whole? So there you have true checks and balances. You can't get true checks and balances and transparency when a lot of the authority and the decision making goes on behind closed doors on the 3rd floor of the government office building. That's truly the difference that I see. We also see things where the council doesn't always release a lot of the information. There's 2 issues there. A lot of times they're personnel matters, and so the public can't be made aware of that. Other times we do have issues where we have to discuss it in closed sessions. We can't reveal that to the public.
Right.
And I guess maybe a third perspective is we try to take the high road on a lot of this, because if the executive is on Facebook or on PAC 14 about all these issues, and the council, responds to that, a lot of time the public's just saying, why don't you all just get along? So the council has sort of
that
been
sounds
more,
good.
We've tried to be a little more reserved in how we come across and how we challenge it, but I think it's getting more critical, as you said, where the public doesn't know what it doesn't know, and I think especially with what's at stake now, it's important that they realize just very much so what the costs are and the inefficiencies are. We talk about the inefficiencies in legislative processes.
Right.
The council's also witnessed inefficiencies in the management of the employees. We're finding that to be a real serious
I've
concern
heard
of ours.
about that.
Yeah. Every council member has gotten phone calls from employees saying, I love it here. I've been here 20 years, but I can't continue with this. This is becoming really difficult. We're seeing where certain employees, you're seeing a lot of favoritism on one part, and other employees that it's a lot of they're being berated. It's not good. It's not good management. You have to have.
No.
I think with a 7-council management form of government, you have a council administrator who is hired, a hired professional, who has business experience, finance with management of employees, and understands the process well. And if not, you have a 7-member council that has full oversight. And any employee can call any council member and say, hey, your county administrator is not doing what this, and we can address it right there.
Right there.
What happens now is that someone calls us, my God, they're scared to death, first of all, that anyone's going to find out that they've talked to a council person.
Yeah.
And the council, but the public doesn't realize that in this form of government, the council has no control over the management of the employees. We're not even allowed to call a department head. If you call me and say, hey, John, I need a street sign right here on this road, right? I have a pothole down the street. I can't address that with the department head. I have to tell you, I'm your elected official, and I have to tell you, Billy Earl, you have to call the executive's office, and you have to talk to administration so they can pass it down to the departments.
That's ridiculous.
But that's the process of government that we have right now.
Okay.
So it leads to a lot of mismanagement. We just got done with an actual survey. The internal auditor actually did it. She's an independent authority to review the operations throughout the county, and so she did a poll as far as the operations of the employees and how comfortable they feel. And when the polling came back and the survey came back, we found that 25% of the employees in Wicomico County said that they felt that they had been intimidated or bullied, and that they felt they were working in some type of a hostile work environment. That's a real concern.
That's outrageous.
It is outrageous. There's limitations as to what we can do. We could tell them, hey, call the hotline, but the hotline is pretty much going to be redirected to individuals who have to answer to the county executive's office.
Okay.
So right there you have a real serious conflict in as much as that is. So again, I think with the councilmatic form of government, it's proven to be a very successful form of government. We could take any calls we want, and nobody's going to get reprimanded. It's going to get addressed one way or the other. I think that's a real positive.
And is it true that the majority of jurisdictions have opted for that form of government?
Well, it's interesting you say that. They try to make it sound as if, if we lose the executive form of government, we're going to be nobody, we're going to be nowhere. Well, 14 of the 23 counties, 60% of the counties in Maryland are councilmatic forms of government.
Right.
Somerset, Worcester, Dorchester, Cabot, and they're all doing great. They're doing fine. They have the governor's ear whenever they want to. They have the General Assembly's ear when they want to. They go to Mako just like everyone else does. So it works out fine. 82% of the counties in the United States are councilmatic forms of government. So yes, it's a proven form of government. It works. It operates quite well. I think we've tried an alternative form. I don't think it's really working well for us.
I don't know that anybody has really or anybody I know has a really positive viewpoint of the succession of county executives, and some of it may be personality, but the great majority of it seems to be that there is too much power vested in that position, and that the opportunity to abuse it comes up more often than one might expect.
Sure, you're going to see that abuse. You're also going to see personal preferences involved, whatever the proclivity might be of the county executive as to what they may want to do or may not want to do. You're subjected to that. And we see it all the time. I know there was a recent forum where the forum was a little bit one-sided. The representative that was supposed to represent the councilmanic form of government canceled the last minute. So you had three individuals on the podium, and for the most part, at least two of the three I know were very heavily influenced in the form of an executive form of government.
Oh yeah,
that's what they believed in. One of them, I think, probably should have been removed completely, because we know that she received a $2,000 campaign contribution from Ms. Giordano, which automatically should have disqualified her from that forum.
Should have
entirely. But a lot of things were discussed. I think one issue was that, as I think we touched on before, was that the executive likes to say that she's one phone call away from the governor. Well, we all are. I've talked to the governor. I've been, I've been over my period of time. I've been in the governor's office. I've been to Annapolis every single week when they're in session, so I understand what contributions the county makes to Annapolis and where you get some benefit received from that. So, yeah, there may be one phone call away, but you also have to ask yourself, what happens if that governor just isn't really on best of terms with your executive?
Right.
What happens then?
Right.
So you've sort of narrowed yourself down as a county where you have one person representing, to a certain degree, representing the face of Wicomico County, which may not necessarily be a good thing.
Well, and then it begs the further question, and this is one that pops up all over the political horizon, and that's a question of temperament.
Exactly. Temperament is huge, and I think that's really lacking what we've experienced over the last couple of years.
Yeah.
I mean, I think you've hit the nail on the head there, and I think people see that. When I go to Mako, I see people there all the time. I go, John, what's going on in Wicomico?
Right.
Yeah. But I think that is a big part of it, especially when you're trying to, you want someone that's professional and recognizes and has experience with dealing with other individuals, professionals, et cetera,
Right.
and also managing employees. We were talking about the forum. Another issue that came up was that, as a department head can go right to the executive. And I don't have to wait 2 weeks to talk to a county council. It's not necessarily true. That individual could call, if it was just a councilmatic form of government, they have 7 people they can call.
Mm-hmm.
We all have cell phones. So they can call us anytime if they have a proposal that they want to present. But we have to review it as a group, which is the way it should be done. Or a council administrator could review it day to day.
Right.
But what happens here, you talk about temperament, what happens when this individual brings this project that they've been spending 3 weeks on, and they really want to see it done? Well, it all depends on what that executive wants to do. The executive can kill that project right there, and it never goes before a council at all. It never goes before the public. So you have to balance that out. I mean, you don't really have a 2-week delay with the council, but you can also get a more efficient response as well, and a more fair and balanced approach with more objectivity as to whether or not they like whatever program you may or may not have been presenting. In addition, when people call me, as I touched on before, if you call me, I can't handle a pothole. But if it's a 7-member councilmanic government, it's going to get fixed the next day.
Got it.
So there's your efficiency of operations.
Well, it's an interesting thing. There's a cry among voters almost worldwide that basically makes a point and then assumes arguendo that it's going to be solved by this point. And the point is experience. The point is change. The point is people, I've seen some of the recent polling, people want something new, they want something different. Well, yeah, if it's better.
Right.
If the person who is now responsible for carrying this out is experienced in these matters, has the right temperament, understands these issues as they relate to people in their jurisdiction, and not necessarily to the donor class.
Right, and I think something else you need to consider too. People say, well, you can always vote them out in 4 years. That's the democratic way. Well, it's also democratic to have a 7-member council.
Yeah.
A proven, successful form of government. But they say, just change it in 4 years. That's easy to say, but when you have an employee that immediately feels like they've been harassed, and this goes on for year after year after year, a minimum 4-year cycle,
Yeah.
it could be an 8-year cycle. That person, these are people who used to enjoy working here. And now they're subjected to this,
Yeah.
and their families are subjected to it because you take that home. It doesn't just stay in the office. You take that home.
You have no choice.
So tell those people that you just stick it out for 4 years. We might be able to make it
No,
work
that's
the next
not a
time.
good argument.
So when you weigh the balance of electing one person as opposed to reverting back to a very successful form where you elect 7 who actually can work together, I think it's a relatively easy decision to see as far as what might be the more effective form of government. There are executive forms of government that may work out there. I'm sure there are, but I just don't see where it's worked in this level for us in Wicomico County.
Well, the history of the county executive in Wicomico is not necessarily a very positive one, and I think that the current state is not an exception to that rule. but maybe an exception to the rule of abuse. Maybe what it really is saying is that maybe this is being fostered by the individual who now holds this position, and there's criticism on that point, that it's personal, that it's da-da-da. And as a citizen, I don't really see that. What I see being pointed at is decisions, protocols, degrees of closeness with the donor class, and what kind of legislative gruel is being coming from the county executive's office. And I understand making that argument because it can be a very effective argument to the low information voter. Now, to the high information voter, they're going to look at that and say, well, nonsense, let's move to a more substantive argument. But that doesn't seem to be what's going on, does it?
It doesn't seem to be what's going on. Again, you have to ask yourself, why do we have two forms of government? Why are we paying for two forms of government to do what one form of government can do quite well and actually much more successfully? When you have a councilmanic form of government, they talk about checks and balances. There's the true checks and balances, as we said earlier. You know, that gets lost in the executive legislative form of government. It doesn't get lost when you have a councilmanic form of government, because the council itself is its own checks and balances with the public.
Yeah.
You operate in public. I think there's also, you can't help but have more transparency, because the work is done at the table in public sessions,
right,
with those people. It's more efficient, as we discussed, because issues, whether it's legislative issues or whether it's employee issues, it's all done right there with one body of government in collaboration with each other. Budgets right now, the way that we do budgets, the budgets go to the executive. The executive can cut and tear out anything they want. We had one year where the Chiefs Association wasn't even brought into the executive's office to discuss the budget. So, and that's just not right. The right way, I think, to treat public, your public servants, especially those that are in the fire prevention industry. But as a broader scope, anything can be put into the budget at the preference of just one individual. The council simply gets their cursory review and can make cuts. We can't add unless it's education. We can't add. The only thing we can do is make recommendations of what we might want to see added. This last budget session, the executive actually busted the revenue cap unilaterally, said we're not going to pay attention to the revenue cap, and then portrayed it as giving a tax reduction to the citizens of Wicomico County in a press release. The reality was she increased their taxes in consideration of the fact that with a revenue cap, it was supposed to go down, let's say, 2 cents.
Right.
But by busting the revenue cap, she only allowed it to go down 1 cent as far as the tax rate. So there was not as much money going back into the pockets of the citizens of Wicomico County. Now, when it came to the council, we reversed that. And
Right.
we restored that funding. We reversed it so that the citizens of Wicomico County got the full benefit of their tax breaks, through the revenue cap. I guess other issues as well is that, when you're looking at trying to deal with county issues as a whole, whether it's legislative, whether it's the employees, I think you have a much more consolidated effort to make sure that you're looking out for the best interests of the citizens of Wicomico County. People seem to forget one thing, and that is that we've done this before.
Right.
We've been very successful. A 7-member council, and I've said this before, a 7-member council gave you Shorebird Stadium. We didn't need an executive to do that. We gave the Henry Parker Sports Complex, a new civic center, numerous new schools, a solid law enforcement agency, and with the fire companies. We've funded the fire companies, and we've been doing it for years and doing it successfully. So you have to ask yourself, what's wrong with that form?
Right.
It's proven, it's successful.
And why is the current form an improvement?
Right.
Why would that be? Let's backtrack just a touch, because we were talking about the information flow, and it has come to my attention that done in a very professional manner from a consulting viewpoint, mailers that go out to the voters have very different messages predicated on whether they are D's or R's.
Right.
As a unaffiliated, I didn't get any, so I'm sorry, because
Lucky you.
I always get that stuff. I love to get that stuff
Right.
because I want to see what the messaging is, and I want to see what direction they're going and whether they're going in a direction that is truthful and forthright, or whether we're playing games with words and
That's true.
pictures.
It's valid.
Because those pictures have value, and so what it appears is that the message shifts dramatically, and in some ways it's almost a scare tactic.
Well, and your point's very valid. I know that 2 flyers recently went out. One of them is kind of humorous, actually. I think there were pictures with and this is for more recent issues here, where the picture showed of the executive with Governor Westmore.
Mm-hmm.
That's big. It's not about left or right. It's right or wrong, and that. So and
It's
that
about
went,
right or wrong.
yeah, and that went, as I understand it, that went to the Democratic constituency. So a week later, the one that went to the Republic was criticizing Kamala Harris and AOC.
Right. Oh,
rightfully so if you're a Republican, right?
Yeah.
But what really I found very disingenuous and disappointing was that on the other side, it said that if you vote for a councilmanic form of government, you're going to get more taxes, and yet
Right.
we're the ones that lowered the tax
Yeah.
rates, and that you were going to, it was going to be bad for law enforcement. And we had just issued new raises and new post-employment benefits for law enforcement. Why, if you have a valid argument, are you subjecting the public to misleading profiles? I mean, of all the things you could have chosen, there are so many issues possibly where, and if you're going to state your case, state your case.
Right.
But instead, it was more like a character assassination with false presumptions
Mm-hmm.
that we were going to raise your taxes. Never a word breathed of that by any council members. No interest whatsoever in reducing any funding for law enforcement.
Well, it's a good example of reductio ad absurdum, where a proposition is made and then it elevates to a point of chaos and harm and etc. without any evidence to support it. It's just that person's opinion. But in the consulting class, this is the kind of thing that is used when the people who are looking to be messaged that there's a fear that their side is not going to win, so they ratchet up fear.
Rhetoric.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And they use that fear in many, not always,
Right.
but to some degree in a disingenuous manner.
Very true, and sometimes the people aren't going to know any different.
No.
But the most part, but I think it's insulting to the people's intelligence to try to put that out there. The people, that is what people
Yeah.
don't like about politics. That is what they do not like about politics, when they find out and they recognize that it's totally disingenuous at times. When the real thing should be that you should be working on behalf of the citizens, trying to do everything you can, whether it's schools, roads, public safety, you name it. That's what you should be working towards. And that's what I would like to see more of. And I think you'd see more of that from a council perspective. I have to also add, it probably as a final note, the one thing that I found is so much different. When you look back on the Tony Sarbanes, the Phil Tillmans, the Henry Parkers, all the council forms of government that we've had over the last 20, 30 years, not once did you see this type of, I think, hostile environment.
Right.
This type of denigration, character assassinations, faulty lawsuits that are coming into play, Facebook posts, PAC-14 shows.
Yeah.
Never in the past has the public been subjected to this type of dysfunction. And I think that, so more than anything else, should be a wake-up call for the citizens of Wicomico County to say, let's get this back to a settled, responsible form of government that everybody is familiar with, that's very productive, and we know it works well. It's proven to be successful.
Right.
Why don't we just get back to what the true American democracy is supposed to be?
Well, that would be the wisest possible avenue that we could take. John, I really want to thank you for coming on and
Sure.
clarifying. There's a lot of complicated issues here,
I understand.
and it really is up to the voter to educate themselves and to spend some time looking at what the facts are. And the fact of the matter is, you've got to vote. And listen, if you listen to this entire show, I think that you have the beginnings of a knowledge base that will help you make the wisest possible decision. And let's be frank, it's for you. It's not about these politicians, it's not about these offices as much as it is about you, the voter, the person who lives here in Wicomico County and wants your county to be the most efficient and the most beneficial to everyone. And that's the test. Anyway, this is Billy Earl Amos, and this is my guest, President John Cannon, here on Eastern Shore Politics. Have a great day. Vote and get everybody you know to get out and vote. Question A. You know what I'm saying. Thank you and God bless you.